I'm Michael Reese.
And I'm Woods Davis.
And this is the Digital President Podcast.
We've cracked the code for generating customers online for every business model.
In fact, we wrote the book on it.
We've built multiple multi-million-dollar businesses in as little as 90 days. And the one truth that we discovered is
the best business model is doing what you love and living your life by strategy.
You truly can follow your passion and create the life of your dreams,
as long as you have the right strategy.
If you're a real estate agent and you'd like to learn how you can partner with us to help you implement our strategies and systems in your business so you can make a lot more money and have a lot more time freedom, all without ever paying us a penny or giving up a percentage of your commission, go to partnershipdetails.com and schedule a call with us today. While it's fresh in your mind, go to partnershipdetails.com. Now on to the podcast.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Digital President Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about really one of the most important things you need to know, both in business and your personal life when it comes down to profitability. We're going to dig into it. I'm your host, Michael Reese.
I'm your co-host, Woods Davis.
So yeah, man, I'm excited, man. I really liked our last episode because I felt like people got behind the scenes. I know we have a lot of these discussions. We probably had 3 discussions already this morning, and we always say, man, if people could just listen to this is where the fire's at. So for today, what we're going to talk about is really, it's an element of determining your freedom number. We talked on the last episode, the importance of determining your freedom number, which is basically the number you need in order to survive, right? And but that's in your personal life. What we really want to talk about here is here's the problem. Let me set the stage here, Woods. The problem is that I've met a lot of real estate teams, and I've actually been, I don't want to say a victim, but I've definitely been a violator of this principle. I've met a lot of teams where when I look at their business, it might have been more profitable for them specifically to stay a solopreneur because they were making way more profit. And so you see a lot of real estate agents that want to build a team. And sometimes you got to know what the sacrifice is, what's the cause and effect, both in your personal and your business life. So we'll really talk about, determining your break even, both in your personal life and your business life, and why that's so important. And I think it's a metric you need to know.
For sure, especially if you're going to scale something. I mean, if you're going to grow any business, you got to make sure that it's going to grow and scale efficiently. I mean, I think, dude, I see the same things all the time, especially with real estate teams, or what happens even with or people having maybe a small independent brokerage. And if you take their personal production out of the picture, it's not really profitable.
Before you scale something, right? Because this is a discussion. And so what I don't want to do is just, I want to have a discussion with you, and I want to dig into that a little bit. You say before you scale something, but don't you think you need to know your break even before you even scale?
Well, absolutely. Well, you just got to get clear on the baseline financial model for the business. The business has one job, and it's to produce profit.
Here's what happened to me. Okay. First of all, what gets measured gets monitored. What gets measured, monitored, and reported improves. What gets measured and monitored and reported publicly improves dramatically. So if you go back to the great game of business, Jack Stack wrote a book, remember being at Inc. 500, 5,000, where you have the top fastest growing businesses that are scaling to your point. And he's always a keynote, and he's integrated at a different level. I don't know if he was a co-founder, but his story is that he took over a business as an employee with a bunch of other employees. The main thing is they created a model for creating a profitable business, and they did it with these metrics. And so for me, everybody knows, and if you don't know, we have a great group of guys that are doing an Ironman, and one of the things that I've done personally is I've lost 25 pounds. I've lost 25 pounds as of this morning in the last 30 days, as of really today.
That's awesome.
But the point is that the real game changer, Woods, was when I bought my Garmin scale. See, I've had a Fitbit scale. I went online. First of all, when you look at cost and price, and this is a separate point, if you get something cheaper but never use it, then it actually costs you more, right? If you get something and it's more expensive, the price is higher, but you use it every day, it costs you less because it's the cost of using it. You're actually using it, And for me, the Garmin scale, I was using Garmin Connect, which, Garmin is kind of an ecosystem for training, both when you're doing an Ironman, swimming, running, biking. And there's like I said, an ecosystem. And the scale, when you step on it every single day, it allows you to set a goal. And once you set that goal, you set a bunch of different types of goals. But what you have to know if you're going to lose weight is you got to know your break even, right? If you don't know your break even, like your calorie threshold for the day and what calories you put in and what calories you burnt, if you don't know that, then you're basically not going to lose weight. And I was watching a podcast that I love to tune into, which was Joe Rogan. And he made the point when someone, his co-host or his guest rather, was talking about, they were talking about COVID, and they were talking about, why isn't there anything, and this isn't a COVID conversation, but he was basically making the argument that, you got to do this, you got to do that, but no one's, mandating. They say, when you go to the hospital and you're not vaccinated, that because you're not vaccinated, you really got to deal with a lot of these problems on your own because you didn't take the precautions. That was the argument being made on the podcast. Not my argument, it was just the argument. And that he said that would be like coming to the hospital with heart disease and saying, well, since you didn't exercise regularly, there's nothing we can do about it. I think it was a great point, right? The point is that when what someone does in order to get where they are, if they have a problem at the hospital, you should still help them, and you shouldn't use this vaccinated versus non-vaccinated as a point of what you're willing to cover as an insurance company, yada yada yada. Well, and what we're talking about is in your business. For me, it all started in my personal life. I wanted to get debt free, and I don't remember the exact numbers. I probably have them somewhere, but it was around just under 12,000 in 2010 is what it cost me to live. In 2010, 11 years, almost 12 years ago, me and my wife got married, and the very first thing I did was, and again, I'm not advocating one belief or one philosophy, but for me at the time, I'm a seeker. So I bought the Dave Ramsey book. And I went through the Dave Ramsey course. There was a restaurant outside of our development, and me and my wife went there every single weekend, and we went over our fixed expenses. Anytime when I moved to Puerto Rico, I could call my wife in here right now, and she would tell you every time we've made a major, move in our life, it was about our fixed expenses. And for me, even right now, I'm in the middle of a real estate transaction, and this real estate transaction is going to lower my fixed expenses by roughly $8,000 a month. But I'm also purchasing real estate as well. But I'm doing 2 real estate transactions. But one of them is going to lower my expenses, and the other one I'm going to gain expenses. But based upon my budget, it's going to be a net zero, right? Because I have a cost of living. And in your personal life, what I want to tell you is that, I meet a lot of people and they're not able to make the right decisions in their business because they're not managing their life. And so if you don't think your life and your business is integrated, I'm here to tell you your life, your business, your physical health, your relationship with your spouse and friends, and all of that is integrated. And if you want to get free in your life, if you want to be able to have freedom, and freedom meaning you're in a situation where you're not working with clients that you don't want to. You're doing the things that you want to do, even in your business and in your life. And you do that by first, identifying the reason why you're doing the current set of things that you're doing. And the reason why you have to do them is based upon these expenses. And so for us, we did the real simple framework. We did the debt snowball. But I'm telling you right now, what it did is it gave me the freedom to make decisions that over the course of time, these are decisions I would not have been able to make if in my personal life I would have kept my expenses high. And so, I remembered when I first had this aha, it was when my boss literally, I'll say his name. His name was Drinkwater, Thomas Drinkwater. He's a good friend to this. I don't talk to him much, but have tremendous amount of respect for him. And an employee who was a manager, Rob Wood, went out and bought the nicest truck. I mean, it was if you're from Texas, then people like their trucks in Texas. And this guy wasn't only from Texas. I mean, this guy went to the rodeo on the weekend, and he bought what they call as a dually, one of those trucks with the big 4 wheels in the back. He brought a nice brush guard. He bought every accessory for this truck. And I remember Thomas saying, man, I'm so excited that Rob bought the truck. And I asked him why. He said, because he's going to have to work harder. he's going to have to work harder for paying for it, right? And so for me, I took that to mind. And at that particular time, I was driving an S10, and it literally had 2 spare tires on it. And I'm known for that was at my previous occupation, which was the the fitness industry. When I got into real estate, up until Woods was in the car when my vehicle caught on fire, and he looked over, and I jumped out of the car in the middle of a field. I drove.
I'm in the car still. The car's on fire. I just look over, and Michael's nowhere to be found. Like he had literally jumped out of the car. I'm still in the car. The car's rolling, caught on fire.
And I remembered my kids as they got older. My kids were real young, and they loved my car because it was a bigger car, and they enjoyed riding in it. But I remember as they started becoming more aware, they would say, "Dad, we don't want to ride in your car. We don't want to ride in your car." And it wasn't a bad car, but little things fall off on a car. Over time, I think I drove that car from 2003-ish, 4-ish, all the way to probably 2017, 18. Right. And the point is that was part of I'm not endorsing that. I'm not saying that you don't get a new car. But what I'm saying is, for me, that I had to make sacrifices, and the sacrifices that I made on that vehicle when it was paid off, because obviously I was accustomed to paying for it. But when I stopped paying for that vehicle, that money that was an overage in my budget now was able to be invested into things that gave me a greater return in my business. And so the main thing that you're going to hear us talk about when it comes down to knowing your expenses, it's looking at your expenses. And then, even in, I give credit where credit's due. I mean, in the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, Gary Keller breaks down, a high level kind of recommendation of what your expenses should be on your office, on marketing, all of these things. Well, that stuff gets real, things get real complicated and messy when you start looking at the goals that you're setting. So for an example, if your goal is to sell, let's say your assumptions are you're going to make $10,000 a transaction. The minute you go to becoming a team, you got to understand those cost of goods sold are out the window, because you got to remember you're going to give those transactions to an agent on a split. You're going to have to still pay for those transactions. And in order for what Woods was saying, in order for your model to scale, you have to know, are you still in production? And there's a lot of teams, Woods, a lot of teams out there. When you take their personal production out of the equation, they're not profitable. And so that's really when people say stepping out of production, which is ultimately kind of the buzzword of 2015 to 2019, as these teams, continue to grow, so many people wanted to get out of production, but they couldn't get out of production because they weighted themselves down with these set of expenses that, you just have to look at. That's it. You have to look at them. You have to know what they are, and you got to know them for your personal life, because your personal life will impact your business life, and vice versa.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest things. I think where the real rubber hits the road and the tactical implementation of getting a hold of this and getting that clarity is literally getting it into the calendar, getting a regularly scheduled financial meeting where you literally review all of the expenses, and you cancel stuff that you don't need. You shut stuff off that you're not using, and you have awareness around what all those expenses are. There's a scripture that says, the truth shall set you free, right? And I think that's when you had that come to Jesus moment about getting debt free. I did the same exact thing. Digging into Dave Ramsey, and I think that why it all starts with creating a budget, right? Getting clear on all those expenses, adding up all of your debt, and doing. He has a little methodology called the debt snowball. But when you have that awareness of what everything is.
I'm not advocating for the debt snowball in my personal life.
I'm not either.
Yeah. I'm not saying you are. I'm just making a statement because I don't want things to get misconstrued. I did it because I was in a position where I was not able to make the right decisions because I had to go out and cover my bills. And I was stuck in this transactional way of living.
Yeah.
And what I'm recommending for people is, and this is 100% life by strategy. I mean, when I do my life by strategy, I have it right now. I'm not going to share this. I mean, it's personal information. And more importantly, I don't want to share it because I don't want to be bragging, honestly, because by going through this process over time, I've been able to accumulate wealth. And I remember when my first mortgage was $5,000, $4,500 to be exact. And a buddy of mine, Chris Curry, who now lives in Colorado, but used to live in Gainesville, Florida. We were at a conference, and when we were at the conference, my mortgage was like $900, and he shared that his was like $4,500, and I was like, "What? Are you kidding me? You pay $4,500? I mean, that was like unbelievable." And then it went from $4,500 a month to $8,000 a month to $20,000 a month to $27,000 a month just to operate my household. But that was always, like Wood said, that's not to operate my household. That's just to pay for my roof. That's not my electric. That's not anything. And so what me and my wife were able to do, because again, just because you're doing these numbers doesn't mean the numbers can't be big. The numbers can get big if you are willing to sacrifice on the front end. The reason mine grew is because I was able to invest in my business. And through those investments, I made good ones and I made bad ones. But some of the good ones, once I made that investment, those things lasted for years and years and years. And looking back, those decisions that could have been vetoed, because I would be thinking, oh man, if I do that, then, I'm not going to be able to take this much out of the business in order to pay this. And that was more important during the first year, right? And what I'm saying is that for me, we have the Reese family financial meeting, right? And I would like to say we do it every Sunday. We originally did it every Sunday. We did it every Sunday when we moved here in the mornings. But all of it, now I do most of it. My wife is involved, sporadically for other reasons. We have 3 kids with one on the way. Our Sunday mornings can be a handful. But I will tell you that entire document, that very, 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 very first column in the Excel spreadsheet is fixed expenses. And fixed expenses are expenses that you have to pay regardless. Every single month, regardless, you have to pay them. Variable expenses are expenses that you have the choice whether to take on that expense or not. And determining that fixed expense is really the amount of money that you need to generate monthly. Some people call it people call it different things, but I like to refer to it as your break even, right? And then setting a goal on how you're going to cover that and then go over your break even. And here's one point, and I know I want to make this point. This is the most important point that I'm going to make. I want to walk you through a real life scenario on how I think about it. So when let's just say my fixed expenses are $10,000 and I'm trying to generate $5,000 in order to invest in my business, I have to produce $15,000 in revenue to generate an extra $5,000 to either invest in my business. Let's just say invest in my business, so to speak. I'm a solopreneur, right? But if I want to double that, I got to do, let's say $20,000, right? To double that, I got to do $20,000. But if I'm looking at, I just want to produce 10 grand, to double that over 2 months, I got to do 30,000, right? Because I got to do 15 in month 1, 15 in month 2 to generate an extra 10. And right, if I do 15 in month 1, I got an extra 5. If I do 15 in month 2, I got an extra 5. But if I can do 20 in month 1 and 20 in month 2, right? Then I'm going to produce an extra 20. To produce an extra 10, all I got to do is 20 in month 1 because my fixed expenses are covered, right? To cover my fixed expenses, I got to produce 10 and an additional 10. And in the other scenario, I got to produce 10, I got to produce 15 to get 5. And then next month, because I got to pay all my bills and now produce another 15 to get 5. And guys, money moves to speed. Money moves to speed. And so, if you make an investment in Bitcoin, I guarantee you would rather have done it sooner than later. You rather have done it 3 years ago or 4 years ago or 5 years ago. Whether Bitcoin went up or down, even though it's been extremely volatile, the sooner you could have made the decision to get into it, the sooner you could have produced the additional profit or additional revenue to invest above and beyond your expenses. So when you lower those expenses, what you're doing is you're putting yourself into a position to do things faster.
Well, I was just going to say, I really like business models, like when you're thinking about your business too, generally speaking, I like when you can keep your fixed expenses as low as possible and then scale with variable expenses. So I'll just give you one example. Let's say that you want to grow your team. What's really easy when you're trying to scale up, if you have a model that you have to increase your office space, you got to have more administrative staff, you have to have more salaries and support in order to support those new team members, which is increasing your fixed expenses. I don't like that as much. What I really like is when you can create a model that, let's say, pivots off of lead generation. So for example, if I know that for every agent that I bring onto my team, that I'm going to invest $500 per month in lead generation. Let's just say that's going to produce them 100 leads and that's going to get them 1 or 2 transactions. Then I have a really easy way to keep my fixed costs the same. And I have a way to increase and scale with variable costs. I only incur those variable expenses when I add a new agent. Plus, it's really easy to do the math that I know that if on average I'm going to make $5,000 per transaction from that agent's commission that they make on that, and I know that I'm on average investing $500 in lead generation in order to produce that, well, that's a 10x return, right? So that's a real scalable, profitable model. But what happens, and this just like you said, you mean you've seen it, I've seen it time and time again, is the continual scaling of fixed expenses and scaling the business inefficiently. So like when you just have a hyper awareness around it.
But that's not what I'm saying. I didn't say the continuous scaling of fixed expenses. What I'm saying, Woods, is that I've met real estate agents that did exactly what you just said. And then what they end up doing is they end up going to Nikki, Natalie, Paul, Philip, Pete, and spending all their time training them, doing one-on-ones with them, and not doing the things that produce revenue. And as a solo agent, I'm telling you right now, I've seen teams who do $1 million in production, and the team leader is doing more transactions to cover those fixed expenses. They have a headache trying to get these agents to make the calls. Now, I'm not saying that you don't get lucky, but I will tell you 100%, if surveyed, 9 or 8 out of 10 teams outside of their 20 percenters, 80% of their time is trying to get the 80% of the agents to do the basics. I believe in my beginning in business that I would have been extremely more profitable personally. Now, there's a lot of things that come with, you get trophies, you get recognition, all of those things that you get, but you can't take those to the bank. And so if you are going to scale this $500 investment, then you have to look at it as what is the expense that you're taking. And the expense you're taking is you're taking on the expense of giving 50 cents of that dollar away in lieu of you doing that transaction. And if you could have done that transaction faster, better, or had to do fewer, and you're having to get sucked into building the systems and processes and training, sometimes it's better to be a high efficient, smaller team. Now, all of this goes out the window when you have a high average transaction price. Let's just lay that on the table. A high average transaction price will cover a lot of sins. And I will tell you that here's the thing, here's the caveat. And if you're okay with building a team where 80% of the people on your team are starving, because that's what happens. You can meet a team that's doing 500, 1,000, 1,500 transactions, but you show me that 1,500 transaction team, and you go through 50% of the agents on their team, walk into their house, get into their car, interview their spouse, and they're not living typically in a traditional model. They're struggling, right? They're struggling to be on the team in order to produce. And what they need in order to be successful is they need someone. Here's an example and a metaphor. When we did the bike, I hired a guy who's a bike coach. He's called the Bike Whisperer. Let me tell you something. I learned more from this guy on how to ride a bike. I didn't know there was so much, from shifting gears to through the managing my energy through, the cadence and power and all these things that if I would have just bought a bike, which I did, and what I was going to do is just go out there and ride it, I needed somebody to give me the time. Well, when you see some of these teams, Woods, some of these teams, they're huge. And those huge teams, they do produce a lot of profit for the head person. But when somebody's not at that level and they're making that transition, they have to know the expenses that they're going to add along the way. And they have to know at least the compare and contrast. Like, okay, I'm trying to produce X in order to do Y based upon your life by strategy. And sometimes you can recruit somebody onto your team who's a new agent. Sometimes you can recruit people onto your team through the value proposition of somebody wants to join my team because they want to increase production and they're looking for these things. This is the value exchange. This is what they're wanting me to do in exchange. Here's my responsibility and theirs. And in the beginning, when you have a huge support team, when you have a sales manager, when you have a trainer, when you have someone running marketing, it doesn't pull you. But when you start the team and they're like, okay, I need my business cards. You're like, what? I need to order my business cards.
We don't have a system for that yet.
Right. And so all of that is just things. All I'm saying is I'm just trying to create awareness that, if it's way easier to grow fast than slow, but it sucks to live in between. And if you don't know your break even and you don't know the assumptions and how those are integrated with your personal life. For me, I look at it as if I'm going to bring somebody onto my team, I have a choice. Am I going to bring somebody in the very first agent? Am I going to be bringing somebody on who's never been successful, who doesn't know how to write a contract? That's a different obligation because that's really bringing on someone that you're mentoring. Or are you bringing somebody on who's been successful? They just moved to your market. And based upon where they are in their life, they just don't want to take on all of those responsibilities. And those are give and takes and things to consider when you're building your team. But you can't make any of those decisions if, like what Wood said, that was so brilliant in the very beginning, which is, are you having that financial meeting? Are you reviewing those fixed expenses? Are there fixed expenses right now that you can get rid of? Are there variable expenses right now that you can get rid of? And really, what is your current break even? And here's the thing. Here's the biggest challenge. What do you think it's going to be when you're operating at whatever it is that you're trying to build? Because that's really laying out the model and understanding what it looks like at scale that you were saying also, Woods, that I do agree with 100% is the scaling of the model. You have to make sure what you're doing is going to scale. But I'm telling you, most people watching this video is they think they want a team. And the truth is that you have to look at your decisions, which you might need to build a team. I certainly would build a team. I just know what I would do first. If I built a team, I'm starting with an ISA before I start with an agent, right? I'm gonna hire an inside sales agent first because I'm gonna instead of now I can hand off my transactions. I can set up a referral based model. I can give that to an agent who's already successful, that's not going to have, and I can test them no different than when Dave Ramsey sends out a referral. He sends it to 3 people, and whoever does the best job is obviously going to be self-selected to get referrals. So I can create an agreement where I'm not getting any of the training issues. I'm not getting any of that stuff. I'm just trying to monetize my buyer side, and I'm trying to optimize signs in the yard. Now, if I'm going to bring on a team, here's the thing is when you bring on a team, are you going to have a sales manager? Are you going to be the sales manager? Are you going to have a sales meeting with no agenda with, whipping that thing out, 5 minutes before with a piece of paper where people feel like they're in meetings that don't even have any purpose because you're just going through the motions because you don't have the time to invest because you're stuck in production. So the goal is it's not only understanding what those fixed expenses are, but it's saying, where do I think I'm going to be at in year 1, year 3, year 5? And what do I believe those expensive fixed expenses are going to be? How are those fixed expenses going to scale? And where is that income or revenue going to come from? And when you add all that up and you look at it side by side, you might be taking on more work that you don't enjoy, more specifically, meaning you might end up doing a bunch of things that you don't enjoy doing. to make the same amount of money that you did. And I see people, the guy I met who flew out to Puerto Rico this weekend, he said, man, I just got burnt out and had to take a step back, right? But him getting burnt out and taking a step back did not mean that he took a step back and made less money. He took a step back and focused on some production. The thing that I love, and let's just face it, the thing I love about EXP is that I'm not recruiting to my team. I'm offering the same value that I would. Will I train an agent? Will I give them a listing presentation, buyer presentation, share sheet, white papers, employment agreements? Will I sit down with that person? Yes, but when I say partner, I'm not saying partner with me and become the Michael Reese team. I'm saying let's partner together and let me invest in you, because there's things because think about it like this. Someone who's never passed their real estate exam can get value from someone that has, right? Because that person can give them pointers, can give them tips, can give them, and I've done this personally with Woods when he was taking his real estate exam. He was going through it. And I said, let me show you something. And Woods, you can testify to that one little pointer cut the time significantly, right?
Absolutely. I've shared that with so many other people.
Yeah. But that's my only point that I want to punctuate is that so at an EXP, I can let someone, I can get paid because of the business model for my contribution of helping the company grow. I can bring people on that are not having the problem of leads. Now I can bring people on that have the problem of leads. I do it all the time. That's what we do the best. But at the same time, I have the systems and the people and the resources to help those individuals. And we have these same discussions, right? We look at what things we can do well, what things we don't do well, what things we enjoy doing, and what we feel like is the value prop. And we do think at scale. But a lot of people, they just think, you know what, I'm gonna start a real estate team. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't. That's not what this is. What I'm saying is know your fixed expenses, know them for your personal life, trim up the fat before you do, get lean and mean, and get your core capital. Core capital means, depending on who you are, where you are, but at minimum, whatever it takes you to run your personal life and to run your business life, make sure you have 60 days of that revenue. I would say a minimum of 90. I always said 90. Read a book, Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits by Greg Crabtree. He would say 60 to 6 months. There's a caveat there, but if you don't have 60 to 90 days of core capital, meaning that you could go in your business and your personal life without selling a house for the next 90 days, and I'm not even saying credit card, I'm just saying in your bank account, right? Credit cards, open credit cards when you don't need them, right? Don't try to open a credit card when you need them. Open them when you don't need them. Keep them paid to zero. It'll increase your credit score, right? Because you have available revolving credit that's not being used, which looks good to people who loan credit. Doesn't look like you're maxing everything out. Get your credit cards when you don't need them for those rainy days, and get your core capital dialed in. And once you have your core capital dialed in, first of all, it's going to be a lot easier to dial in your core capital. It's going to be a lot easier to do that when you have your expenses, your fixed expenses specifically, and your variable expenses at least documented, and you're playing red light, green light, right?
Right. One of the things that I think that I want to make sure everybody grab, because dude, you brought this up. You brought this up several times when you've been talking, and I want to make sure it doesn't get glossed over, is the investment of time. So like one of the things that when we partner with an agent, we generally go through and we look at the expenses, we look at the things that are generating revenue, we get we get ROI established for each of the pillars that they're using to generate revenue, whether that's marketing campaigns, whether it's prospecting, whatever it is. We're trying to get a feel for, okay, what's really driving the business, so we can know what to start doing, stop doing, do more of. And one of the dimensions that I think where a lot of people are blown away is when not only do we look at it just the return on investment, but we look at the return on time. And continually, as we've been having this discussion, you've been bringing up time. When you're scaling a business, are you going to have to invest? How much time are you going to have to invest, training agents, or how much time are you going to have to invest, in all of these different things? And so I think that when you're getting clear on like your expenses, it's not only the expense of money that you have to be concerned about, but it's also the expense of time. because that's another resource that you have, and especially as a solo agent, you have a fixed amount of time in every given day to be able to invest. And so as you're making your plans and as you're building out your model, as you're getting clear on your expenses, get clear on the time, and that's why getting a system around your calendar, dropping those key revenue generating activities in the calendar, allocating those time blocks for those things, that gives you awareness on, hey, I have this fixed amount of time that has to be invested in making these calls. I have fixed amount of time that has to be invested in these appointments in order to drive this business. And so when you're clear on that, it also helps you understand how to scale, because you see where you have no more time left, or you have to, bring somebody else on in order to fill that time, or you need to do things like you mentioned about hiring an ISA to maximize the return on the time that you already have. Maybe, instead of those 2 hours that you were making those prospecting calls or calling FSBOs expireds, circle prospecting for 3 hours in a day, can we hire somebody else to do that so I can spend those times meeting face-to-face with sellers, which is a higher return on that time. So anyways, I just wanted to make that point, dude, because you kept bringing it up. And I know that that's something that we always hammer on, because ultimately that's where we're all trying to get, is complete freedom, financial freedom, time freedom. And it starts with getting awareness on where you're spending your money, where you're spending your time, and how you're going to grow both of those things to get the best return on both of those.
Yeah, well, the reason I said ISA is because it's revenue generating. If you look at your fixed expenses, you're going to look at all of them and say, what out of these expenses, what's actually generates a client and what doesn't. And so when you're going to add on fixed expenses, you want to know the balance between where you're making an investment, where you're putting $1 in and getting one out, or where you're servicing a sale. And a lot of the times people take on fixed expenses where they can take on a variable expense. And so again, it's just taking that time to audit where you're currently at and get awareness of where you're currently at. And it's really, you're doing this because by doing this, it actually, if you have core capital, if you're not paying for stuff you don't need to be doing, if you have the right investment of fixed expenses and you're not investing in the wrong order, then you're going to see your business grow. And it's through that growth that you're able to make other decisions in the future as a result of other people who I talk to, and they're running around like their hair's on fire. They're on the transactional treadmill. They either need a deal or they got too many deals and they can't keep up with them, but they need to close them because they have all of these other financial commitments that they're trying to honor, if you will. And so, here's the thing. A lot of you guys, you don't need more wisdom. You don't need more wisdom. I mean, I'm an advocate for being a relentless learner. I think it's the number one competitive advantage. But most of you need clarity and consistency. So if you want to live your life by strategy, which is the best life to live, then get clarity and become more consistent.
And speaking of revenue generating activities, if you guys want to see the top campaigns, the top funnels that we're investing in right now that are generating the highest return on investment, go check out listingclass.com. You'll see our top performing funnels that are working and generating the most leads, getting the best conversion, and making the most money throughout North America. So go check out listingclass.com. And Michael, man, appreciate the conversation today. Definitely good food for thought.